Thank you everyone for coming today to the last event of this year's ARIVE series. And we want to finish this with a panel discussion. So we have 4 panelists who were we are very happy that they agreed to participate in this panel. We have 2 panelists from Australia, represented by Mark and Barrett, and 2 panelists from New Zealand, represented by Heide and Holger. And today's format will be, sorry, I'm not a very good panelist, so it will be my first time. I'll do my best, but please bear with me. So we will have a first a round of questions to all our panel members and a discussion for about 30 minutes. And then we will have a short Q&A session with the attendees online. So you can raise your hand if you have some questions or type them in the chat, and we will forward them to the panel members. And we will then finish with a short 1-minute closing statement from each of them at the end of the session today. So because we want to talk about the future challenges of XR today, I want to ask, and we will start with Barrett and then go on to Heide, Mark and Holger as they are on my screen. So what do you see the place of XR in our society in the next 5 to 10 years? And do you think there will be some killer app that will propel XR forward? So Barrett.
You first? Okay. Well, okay, I'm on the spot here. Yeah, I mean, of course, given my research background, I should say that the killer app will be immersive analytics, right? But I think if I want to go a little bit broader than that, I think in terms of killer app, I'm not sure. Maybe we don't have it yet. I kind of think it's really the Swiss Army knife. I would like to see that. So 5 to 10 years might be a little optimistic, but what I would really like is to get rid of my phone, or to keep it in my pocket at least, and get rid of these, we're used to interacting with these glass rectangles all of the time. And I mean, that has positive and negative. So kind of contains our computing activities and keeps them separate from the rest of our lives. But, they're also, distracting and having your head down, looking at the phone all the time. I would like to see, this kind of vision of, Mark Weiser's vision of ubiquitous computing kind of realized, and have, information everywhere all the time, just kind of at hand. And, kind of only when you need it. I guess the other side of that is the Pandora's box. So I guess I don't want to start this, panel on a downer, but I think, where do I see it in 5 to 10 years? I think we're kind of at, at a critical point to ask some questions about how we want this to turn out. And I think the kind of trajectory where we see technology going, with things and, reports in the news about, technology causing anxiety and these kind of reinforcing negative behaviors. I think we want to be careful about, trying to make sure that XR doesn't end up on a path and repeat some of the mistakes we've made with mobile devices, with walled gardens and this attention market that we have. And I think with XR, that could go, to some places where that I think hold the technology back, rather than kind of releasing, or freeing us in the way that it has potential to.
So my understanding is your vision is that we will go towards ubiquitous computing, but we need to answer questions about how to use XR as a technology. We don't have a clear path forward.
Yeah. So what do we want that ubiquitous future to look like? So the way that, markets kind of work, it seems like tech companies can't really survive unless they have kind of this 80% market domination. And then the model, it's not just tech companies, it's kind of everything, right? With other services that we have, the model is to kind of undercut and work at a loss until you can kind of drive others out of the market and kind of take over business. So in converse to that, I think, we need to focus on things like interoperability, where I can see your content, you can see my content. We can have content that's available for people to look at, but we're not.
Barrett, you broke up. You'll have to repeat yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to see, kind of more of a marketplace. So there's a lot of talk about this, kind of metaverse, where we could have XR content essentially, everywhere and available, kind of distributed through all of our environments. And I guess what, how can we access that content? So are we free to look at that without, having to, kind of have a walled garden approach where we need to, be logged into a certain service or something to see that? How can we kind of make it more widely available and free exchange of ideas and content?
I see. Thank you. Heide, what is your take on that?
Thank you, Alex.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree partially. So thank you for sending us the questions beforehand, which makes you already a good panel moderator. Because I took some time to have a short walk during lunch break and thinking about it. And so coming from a gaming background, I'm not an expert in the XR field. I know something about games, and especially applied or serious games, and even less about AR and VR. But I think when I think about the development in the next 5 to 10 years, then I hope that we will all be braver to think more out of the box. And that relates to my introduction. So apologies for my ignorance if you all do that already, and then bluntly interrupt me and teach me better. But when I look, for example, into apps and developments for virtual conferences, what happens there is a one-to-one replication of what happens at actual conferences, up to creating lecture rooms and hallways where I have to drop and drag my virtual avatar along, which might be the idea behind to increase my sense of presence. But I think that we should be braver in the sense of really utilizing the traits of XR and really looking into what can they offer. Because, for example, I'm not bounded to the limitations of my physical embodiment in VR anymore. But still, in a virtual conference space, I have to drag along an avatar along a hallway. Why? And these are things that I see in a lot of developments, that we still think very much along physical rules in the physical space, and in trying to replicate what we already have. Why should we? So why not think about really new and really great ideas, how we can use VR and AR. And if we come to that point, I see a big future in, for example, learning and training, wherever something is really difficult to understand, or as I also said with regard to the games, where you really want to bring across complex issues that need also a complex and 3D virtual, whatever, engaging visualization, where I can play around with certain stuff and I can play around together with others. That's something that I would want us to dig deeper into, and to better understand the elements and how to really utilize them, and not only replicate what we already have in the real world.
So do you see the use of XR more in this industrial setting? So not on a personal use case, but more of an applied use case, let's say in training and learning, as you said, from some organization towards the users?
I think for the nearer future, yes, just because it's so expensive to develop. But of course, games and entertainment in general is does have a like huge future if you think about virtual production and how like virtual reality and gaming and cinematics grow together, and how like cinematics use like game engines, for example, to produce virtual spaces. So I definitely think that this has a huge future.
Okay, I thank you at this point. Mark?
Also for me, I think one of the big application growth areas that you'll see in XR is in the collaboration space. You're already seeing with head-mounted augmented reality, a very large number of companies providing remote assistance or remote collaboration experiences. And then with virtual reality, of course, companies like Facebook, the reasons why they're in virtual reality is because they want to build social VR experiences. So with Facebook Horizons and Facebook Workrooms, they're trying to build experiences where dozens or thousands of people can be in VR space together. And so I think AR and VR enable us to collaborate in ways that go far beyond what we can do today with Zoom and desktop tools, and to some extent reproduce face-to-face collaboration, and in fact either in fact go beyond that and provide us with collaboration tools that we don't have in face-to-face. And I think that'll dramatically change how we connect in the future. The COVID situation has brought that home, and that now we've got a lot of people used to working remotely from home, and now they want to have better tools than what they have with current Zoom and other tools like that. And so I think you'll find in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years a wide range of tools that will allow people to work and play wherever they want and feel like they're collaborating together in the same space.
That was a very well formulated answer, very compact.
Yeah, thank you.
Holger, your last and not
so I have to unmute myself here. Kia ora, katoa. So I think my first statement would be, and a little bit like Haida, I did it during the lunch break. I thought about it. My message would be XR is here to stay. So I mean, I was part of the whole thing, and as well as Mark and others. You know, in the 90s we had VR, and then we had AR in the 2000s, and then there was a long gap. Nothing happened really, and then now it resurfaced thanks to things like Oculus and game engine developments and all kinds of mobile phone developments and stuff like that. So I really believe, I have to believe that XR is here to stay. Okay, so the 2020s are the era for XR, I think. I see actually a lot of application scenarios. I don't know whether we will have the killer app, but I see two main areas. So one is highly immersive virtual reality environments, and with highly immersive I mean immersive analytics, immersive collaboration environments, immersive simulation environments, immersive learning environments. So with things we normally can only hardly do in reality, we can do in highly immersive environments. And perhaps my main message here would be, if we want to design for those environments, we should design for presence. So I mean, this is my background. Of course, I'm selling my own research here, but really this is what it makes different from other media experiences. So if there's no presence, there's no virtual environment, right? It's only if you really think you're there, you're highly immersed in that environment, then that makes the difference. And we should promote more things which we can't do in reality. And analytics is one place, definitely. One is definitely also learning, right? Like one of our students did a 4D exploration interface, right? How do we explore four-dimensional space? Right, it's really hard to do in reality, but it is doable in an immersive virtual environment. So that's one. So highly immersive virtual reality I see as one direction coming. The second one is probably at the opposite end of the XR spectrum, is pervasive augmented reality, also a field we are working in. So that means that not I take out my phone to have that AR experience, or I want to use it for that task only, and then I close that app. It is more the continuous augmentation of our environment, which is where the XR system itself, the pervasive AR system itself, is context aware. It's always on, and it actually has a disappearing interface. So we do not explicitly interact with that interface all the time. And here probably the main message would be also a little bit what Barrett hinted upon is ethics by design, right? It's really, we should really think about, well, how do we want to shape the future of that pervasive, always on context-aware, disappearing interface, augmented reality. So this is also where I see the trends, and as I said, I think we are on that track, and we can shape that future. That is probably the main message here from my side. Yep. Cheers.
Thank you. So we have seen different, we heard different opinions, but 2 points I picked out was there was ubiquitous experiences will be very present, and that we will have to design experiences in VR for collaboration or immersive, highly realistic, very immersive experiences. So Holger was saying presence is very important, and Heide was saying, said that we should go maybe also explore beyond the current limitations where we try to replicate the real world in VR. Now, many of these ideas, right? So for example, if you think about conference venues, for the last 3 years, there has been no innovation in this field. All of the conferences that we go to virtually are all on the same platforms. They use the same technology. Not much is happening. And what you are saying, this is your vision for the next 5 to 10 years. So how do you think we can bring the work that you are doing? Let's say Holger is interested on ethics and pervasive AR, right? How do we bring this out of our lab and to the industry? How do we get them to actually apply the ideas that you explore, let's say with Heide, with more utilization of the VR space? How do we bring this out of our niche, out of our exchange with our colleagues in the academia, and make it more something that others we will see in the products in the industry? I think I'll direct this question first to Heide, and then if anybody else wants to pitch in.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there are 2 directions that we have to think about. One is really listen to the people. So it's not only like us with our ideas, but what would people really like wish to see in the developments? Like, do they really want to use it for learning, for example? Like if you're a parent nowadays and you want to like somehow limit the screen time of your children, it's really hard because they use their devices for homework. So they can always like trick you into the narrative of like, I'm just sitting here using it for my homework. And then there's nothing you can do to like limit this. So is it really that people want to use even more media for learning, or do they want to have like real interactions? So I think really like exploring the gap and the need and the expectations of the users is one way to bring it out. And the other one is just like, I think really pragmatic, investing a lot of money. So to create really professional and engaging and real immersive products that like really convince people about, oh, this is it. I really want to use this. I want to have this. I want to invest even more in it outside of academia. It's my 2 cents.
Should I jump in, Alex?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. So I think we as technologists, I'm talking for us now, we as technologists, I think we should really be braver and step out of our box and work together with social scientists and with businesses and end users and policymakers and activists and whatever, to really find out what are the real benefits of the technology we are creating here. And we are the ones who best understand that technology. So we should take that, you know, as a kind of a responsibility. And perhaps in addition to that, I would say we should also try to do more ecologically valid stuff, right? So get out of the lab. You know, we need a lot of lab stuff, yes, but you know, in addition, we should face our fears, get out there and try to get, you know, into the real world. So I would probably suggest more, at least field studies in combination with those stakeholder engagement and perhaps co-design things and stuff like that. So yeah, I really think that would bring it forward. And in addition to what Heide already said, yep.
I will direct this question to Barrett, because so Holger was saying that we need more ecologically valid studies. And from your presentation, you were working with designers, you are exploring how people can use, for example, digital twins in the industry, right? How do we manage the risks of confounding factors by bringing it, let's say, to the industry, designing an application specifically for that particular industry with the need for more in situ studies and more stakeholder input?
Mm-hmm.
What would be your take on that? How would you approach it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think working with industry and people who are stakeholders in particular applications is really important at this stage, because you know, I come from an HCI interaction background, and we're often, you know, we're trying to come up with new things and cool ways to interact with stuff, but then, you know, is it useful? So it's novel, but not necessarily useful. So if you want to make it useful, I think you need to have that input and think about, you know, work with, you know, co-design. I think is really important to understand those application domains to be able to build something that's really has that level of depth that makes it useful. And I think that's actually a good approach. So I think in the longer term, the more widespread of adoption is going to come with, I guess, two things. So one is, you know, social acceptability of the technology and social use. So, you know, being able to use technology in different contexts, and a lot of this has to do with the form factors that we have, right? So it's not really going to be widely adopted until, you know, that form factor becomes very, very light. So like glasses that I'm wearing now, or, you know, kind of 3D hologram things that can replace your TV. So, and at that stage, the content really does become ubiquitous. So you're no longer focused on the device or the technology, you're focused on the content that can just kind of freely fit in naturally into the surroundings. So in the meantime, you know, while we're waiting on technology, we have, you know, it's in relatively early stages. So I say the devices we have now are kind of at the level where, you know, the Palm Pilot was relative to the smartphone that we have now, right? It's early and the interfaces aren't perfect. There's a lot of limitations, but at the same time, it gives us a lot of leverage, and there's a lot we can do with it. So we're lucky that we don't have to build our own head-mounted displays like Mark did when he was doing his PhD. We can use these, and the level of productivity that we have is much higher. So we can do a lot, and we can kind of work towards those interfaces of the future, and we can think about what are people going to use. You know, we can prototype what are people going to do 5, 10, or 20 years from now with existing technology. And I think those industrial use cases are really, you know, a good focus area for the current, you know, stage.
Thank you. Thank you again. I want to follow up on this, but I want to direct this question to Mark. So Barrett was noted that, okay, the industry will be developing the HEVs, and this is on their part. But in your area, Mark, where now you say that Facebook, they're inputting a lot of work into collaborative, this is where you see the future as well, right? So how do you see here the responsibility of the companies? It's no longer just the devices, right? Because they're working on communication, making new ways of how users can interact with each other as part of their product. And you're doing technically similar work, right? So you're also exploring collaboration and in VR and XR. So technically, you are direct competitors with these companies. So where do you see the role of you in the academia and the companies in the industry in this aspect?
Well, I think that's a really great question. There was a really good talk given by Hiroshi Ishii from MIT Media Lab about 10 years ago. And he said that as researchers, what you should be doing is trying to find and set a vision. And the vision should be something that inspires people for 100 years. So whereas as companies, what you're trying to do is develop technology that you can commercialize in the next 2 to 5 years. And so, for example, in my lab, we have a vision around empathic computing that involves being able to share what we're seeing, hearing, and feeling with other people. And the technology to develop that, in the next 3 to 5 years might be around using heart rate sensors and VR headsets. And so Facebook works on the technology, but as researchers, our goal should be to establish and explore different visions that potentially could be used to inspire industry. For example, we've already heard people talk about ubiquitous computing. So that was a vision that Mark Weiser had in the mid-'80s. And the vision was really separate from the technology itself. And that vision helped drive and inspire development of technology. And one of the kind of realities is that as researchers, we have very, very small impact on what a company does in terms of our research output of papers and things like that. In fact, if you want to have a big impact in AR and VR, you should probably go and do a sabbatical at a company or join a company, because you can have a lot more impact at producing something for Facebook than you could at publishing a paper in an ISMA or a VR conference. But what you can do as a researcher is you can research things which are 10 to 20 years away from commercialization, and hopefully set a vision that could be 50 to 100 years away from reality. And then that vision will be what helps drive the industry. So definitely shouldn't be doing things that try to compete head to head with Facebook. I shouldn't be trying to build networking software or develop tools for making avatars, because Facebook has, by one account, Facebook has 10,000 people working on the AR and VR research and development. And as a researcher, my lab is a good size, but it's still nothing compared to that. So what I should be doing is doing research on the topics that Facebook think are too far away from commercialization. And then hopefully in 5 or 10 years' time, they're close enough that Facebook gets interested in my research and funds it, or employs my students, or buys my lab and we become part of Facebook.
Well, I hope they don't, because it would be very sad to lose you.
Oh, well, that's not happening anytime soon, but yeah.
Now, you say that we should create visions and we should not be competing with the companies. But for them to invest the money, right, they need to either see that our vision is true, our vision is within the next, could be realized within the next 5 years. Otherwise, they will not be investing a lot of money. Or we would have collaborations like with Barrett said, we need to explore ways of how to bring our technology to the end stakeholders, how it is actually beneficial, what is the real benefits of using this. So I will direct this question back again to Heide, because you have worked a lot with the industry, right? There's a lot of false, I get the feeling also, Christoph was talking about this on Tuesday. There's a lot of false expectations, over-exaggerated expectations of what our technology can do. How do these expectations potentially compete with our visions of what we want to do with the technology, what we can do with the technology? And what would be your approach to educate others? So if the company comes, you cannot just tell them, oh, it's not going to work, right? But would you see a way to integrate it into your vision and to raise the awareness of the technology and your vision, advertise your vision to others? Sorry, it's I went a bit off track there.
Oh, no worries. I think it's an important yet difficult question. How would I convince someone? I'm not sure whether that's really needed, because I completely agree with Mark that the timelines of academia and industry is something completely different. And when you want to collaborate, you have to align it somehow. And the way I approached it always was to stick to my long-term vision, which in my case is to better understand like how realistic games have to be in order to be like valuable for the end users. And you can't answer such a question with one research project, but you could like put it down as one step towards the vision. So I approach like collaboration with industry as like steps towards my long-term vision. So I have like a direction laid out in every single project, hopefully leads me to my main goal in the end. But I think what you just said is like expectation management, and to be really honest about like what can be achieved and what the aims of academia are is really important. So I usually say that like especially when working with students, that we will reach the state of a mature and testable prototype. And that's fine for us when we can gather some data, when we can use something for teaching and research. And we are also fine with like a company picking up that idea and making money with it, because like maintaining it and doing all that stuff around like games and applications that you need to do, including like community management or something, I'm absolutely not interested in that. And I'm really happy that a company takes over that and then like also drives the innovation further. So I think it's like breaking down the long-term and big aim or goal into smaller ones.
Thank you. Barrett, would you agree? So there's, right, it's again about addressing this gap between what we can do and what the industry actually expects, what is capable with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the other side of this is the applications, right? So there's this kind of middle part. So I think I agree with Mark about this this long-term vision, and this is ideally what we want as researchers. Again, as you know, we're getting more and more encouraged to get funding from industry. So that means this vision is maybe somewhere not 20 years down the line, but if you have industry funding, they're probably less interested in that and maybe want you to work on something that's much closer to being commercialized, right? So there's kind of a spectrum really between things that are, you know, commercializable now, the next big thing, which is what, you know, the industry wants to commercialize, and then the longer term. I saw that talk by Ichi. I remember that was great. But there's another term for that. Bill Buxton calls it the long nose of innovation. So these innovations, things like the touch screen and that became, you know, part of the smartphone was being developed some 20 years before this was created, right? So there's this kind, and then he calls it a nose because there's kind of a wedge shape where you start at the tip, and this is the long-term vision, and then, you know, as it becomes closer to realization, you know, there's you know, so it becomes a stage where you have this kind of commercialization potential and trade-off. So I think in that middle ground, so when I was talking about you know, co-design and working with stakeholders, it gives you the opportunity to also take the existing technologies or the very near future technologies and think about how to apply those. So there's rather than developing new technologies and inventing the next thing, it's about how do you make those useful and how do you find applications for them that actually you know, solve the needs of the users and apply them in a useful way that can help to solve problems.
Thank you. We had two very different, I think, viewpoints between you and Mark. But Holger, I asked all panel members before to come up with a question to the other panelists.
Wait, Alex, I have to jump in here. I want to comment on the last question.
Please go ahead.
So what is that touches very much on what is our role in the game, right? So so we are the only paid profession who develop that vision, right? All others are driven by other forces. So, but we are paid to think, right? We are here to think, and that's what we are paid for. That's a privileged position to be in. So, and that means, and there's an old saying that, let's say university or academia turns, money into knowledge, and, and businesses turn knowledge into money, right? And we are clearly on that side of the spectrum. So that means, what do we do with that knowledge? And then in one case, my main job is to teach, right? To educate the next generation of curious minds, business developers, whatever. And on the other hand, it's also my task to educate and to inform the industry about where they should go and what are the opportunities here, right? And otherwise we can just leave that to the market forces, right? The market will solve itself. There's always the financial interest, and then they will invent all the things they want to invent, right? So, but I think because that space is so big, we should shape that. I mean, it's really, we are paid to think, so we have to shape that, right? So I just wanted to add that to the thing, and that has to do with lots of that gray space and the vision and the working with stakeholders and all that, right? It's that mix we have to develop. But I can't expect from my former colleagues at Mercedes that they think too much about the technological future. I'm paid for it. I'm paid, not they. They are paid to make the next, the bucks with the next car, right? That's the point, right? I just wanted to add that to that. Sorry, Alex, to interrupt here, but I had to get that off my chest. What was your question?
No, we welcome input from all directions. I was gonna let you ask the next question.
That was the question to my peers.
Yes, you can ask. We have time, I think, for 2 questions, so you get the chance to pick one of your peers.
I'm prepared. I have to pick now. Which one do I pick? I pick the, yes, I have a very specific question for Barrett. So Barrett, you in your last talk, you presented, that kind of, I think what it was called, twins or something like that, interface where you had that, that logical data analytics or data, space in virtual reality, which was reconstructed reality somehow. And you could see also the logical connections between different parts of that augmented, in that case, or virtual environment. So I'm now interested in, because that inspired me to think about, okay, if we have that, let's say that augmented reality interface where we run a lot, that pervasive or not, and I want to turn on that kind of breaking the magician's code, revealing what's behind it, also for ethical reasons, right? I want to see what is real, what is virtual. Could you see a link between the two, right? One is in the like the digital twin thing, but also to use it in augmented reality to show to the user actually the inner workings of what we are presenting as an augmentation. What is your take on that?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think this is something that I've thought about this, and I have some work that's kind of related to that. Like there's a paper called ARIVE that I don't think I included in my presentation, which is kind of a you can kind of like program. It's a kind of 3D virtual programming environment where you can make connections between virtual objects and things. And there's actually something very similar on the market now. The name of the company is slipped my mind, but it's this is something that I think is kind of in the works. But this is more for this is not for the average user. This is more for the the technician, right? The debugger, the real world. And I envision this as maybe a role that people have one day. You can go out and get a job as a virtual world debugger and go out and find issues in connectivity and in IoT and smart objects and find out why isn't one object communicating with something over there. And I think we will need this kind of visual map of what's happening behind things. And things are so complex now. We did a tour of this building in central Melbourne, the VCCC hospital, and there's something, when we're working with Honeywell, they said there's something like 80,000 connected data points coming into their control room. So I think, it's just going to scale up, exponentially from here. So I think we need tools to be able to manage that. And yeah, I like the idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barrett, as well. And I would like the second question pertaining to direct to Mark.
Oh, that's a thank you for the opportunity. I don't want to make time because I know there's probably people on the call want to ask questions as well. But I had a question for Heidi, and that was, you know, she's just moved to New Zealand from Europe, and I wanted to see if she's noticed a difference in the European lab research environment compared to New Zealand environment, and you know what we can be doing in New Zealand to be more productive in our research, or and the, you know, for some people on the call here, they're going to be building their own lab spaces sometime in the next few years. So if she's noticed a difference between those two environments and what she thinks we can be doing that will be more productive in our own research.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's hard to give an advice how you can become even more productive, I would say. I think the main difference, and this is unfortunately something that we can only or we only have limited control over, is the different funding landscape that I already mentioned. So I think the European Commission did a good job to encourage researchers to collaborate and to really create great groups of researchers, and really encourage you to look for people who bring in alternative expertise, so that you don't look like for very similar people, but like a very diverse group. And that was very encouraged. So you ended up with like a very diverse research group from like different disciplines, different countries, which I think contributes a lot to the work that you're doing. On the other hand, that of course also creates a huge competition for the limited resources. And comparing like my work in the Netherlands and here, I have the idea that like people are much more open for collaboration, like within academia, but also within industry. So it's easier to connect to colleagues and to create ideas and to create funding applications. The money that you can apply for is a bit less than in Europe, I would say. So that's like the external factors that we can't really control, other than like lobbying maybe in Wellington. I'm not sure how good we are in that.
Great. And
we're not good enough either. We're not good enough either in lobbying, so we have to do more on that side. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, I agree.
And any advice for students creating their own labs and what you should think about how to be productive?
For students, like keep up the good work. Yeah, I think really like connecting to your peers, try to connect to like the ones that have a lot of experience, to other students, to other labs, try to like create, I don't know like how you, Holger and Mark, see it, but create opportunities for students to like visit each other's labs, to see like that things even in New Zealand or like in New Zealand and Australia can be done differently, and still similar, so that like that they create a strong network really early on that also will help them later in their career. That will be my advice. And like, as I said, hopefully we can help them with that by creating opportunities.
Great, thank you for that. It's good advice.
Thank you very much. We don't have enough time for many more questions, so I would like to give the opportunity to our audience to direct a question to either the panel as a whole or to a specific speaker. So if somebody has a question, you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand in Zoom. Tobias?
It's more a comment, and I'll make it very quick because there was this initial disagreement with what is our position and so on. So my comment is just because Barrett mentioned Bill Buxton's nose of, you know, the long nose of not evolution, but you we all know what we're talking about. There's a similar paper to that, which still figured out that actually most of the innovation that came originally out of university. So that just also shows that what our rule is. So evolution takes a long time, but there is we can make an impact. So because Mark said, if you want to make real impact, yeah, we probably, or short-term impact, then at least we should go to companies. But again, mouse and many of these things came of research institutions, and many of them also from universities, just as a side comment.
I think we lost Tobias. Erwin had raised his hand next.
He's frozen.
Yeah, a comment, and possibly people can comment on it. I think ubiquitous computing really is pretty much how our cars evolved. Our cars evolved over 100 and 110 years until they become ubiquitous in our use. Because you get into a modern car and you just don't think about what's happening under the bonnet. You just point it and drive it, or sometimes it drives you. Anyway, moving on. I come from an educational and clinical perspective, and I really want to see what you guys do translated back into the workforce, and how that can change how knowledge is acquired, and how that knowledge is acquired more effectively, and how that more effective knowledge is applied more effectively. And in my instance, it's patient safety. So you can see where that extrapolates. Back in the academic world, if we're just teaching students how using this sort of technology, we need a return on investment. So we need to have a model that gives us a good return on investment, but we need scalability. So we have to crack that hardy nut too. Even on Tuesday, we got a question, how good is 3D VR 180 live streaming? How do we put this into a better aging care centre? So there are people now in the industries looking at where this technology might be of need. So I think you do need to relate to industries to find out what they're thinking about. And I'll leave it there. And by the way, I used touchscreens in the 90s in ICU. They were introduced on cardiac monitors that could touch the screen and change things long before they came to computers. So there was value in that for the company.
Thank you, Arvin. And the last question we will have is from Steffi.
Hello, everyone. This was very, very interesting. So I really enjoyed the discussion. Just from this point where we saw this kind of bit of like contrasting opinions about what happens in industry and academia. So I don't know if other people also have this kind of perception, but for me, it sometimes feels quite challenging to actually compete with the research that is happening in industry. So if I'm, for instance, looking into the men force or woman force that people have, for instance, in the research, in the Facebook research labs or Microsoft research, and what they are able to do, I think from my perspective, it feels sometimes really hard to find actually this kind of gap or niche where I can just, develop my visions without actually competing with the, with this kind of really powerful, just amount of people that are working on these kind of topics. So what are the members of the panel think about this?
Well, I think that's true, but the idea is that, so I've spent some time working in industry, and I'm always amazed that, and those who on the call who've been in industry will probably be able to relate that they have quite a short-term focus. So for example, I spent a little bit of time in Nokia, and Nokia, they were doing 6-month project cycles. So with that short project cycle, it's really impossible to establish a long-term track record or pathway. So what we can do in an academia, of course, our cycles are normally master's students or PhD students. So it's normally a 18 months to 3-year or 3.5-year cycle. So we have the luxury of being able to go deep into an area which industry won't touch because it's too far away from commercialization. So we just need to make sure that the research that we're going to be doing isn't something that gets overtaken by industry in 2 to 3 months. or 2 to 3 years. So for example, if I was doing research on developing tools for creating expressive avatars for VR, that's probably not a good topic to research, because I may be ahead of industry now, but you can bet that Epic with their metahumans or Facebook or some other company will create an expressive avatar making tool within the next year or 18 months, because that's what they're going to need to use in their own platforms. So that's not a good topic for me to research on, because 3 years from now, I'll be well overtaken by them. But if I do something else, for example, looking at how you can build VR interfaces that respond to people's thought patterns, that's probably something which Facebook isn't looking to commercialize in the next 3 to 4 years. So then I have a window of research where they're not working in, and I can do that research. And then maybe in 4 years' time, when they start getting interested, I can then go to Facebook and say, hey, look, I've been working on this for 4 years, give me some grant money or employ my student or something like that. So basically pick a topic where it's at least 4 to 5 years away from being commercially viable, maybe 10 years, and then you're clear of any company activities, I would say.
Thank you, that's very helpful, but also quite tricky.
Well, it is, but you just have to take, it goes back to that vision again as well. You have to think, what is you're going to be, what's your long-term vision going to be, and what are not the applied research, but the fundamental research in that vision. So for example, with my lab focusing on empathic computing, an important part of that could be the neurological aspects. So we'd like to start doing some research on social neuroscience and how that applies to AR and VR. And that's decades away from being commercialized, because even the tools for measuring people's brain activity isn't very good. So you have to think beyond just the technology to think what, and of course people at Otago and your group are doing that. The work that Tobias is working on in terms of computational displays, that's probably 5 to 10 years away from commercialization, I would say. And even some of your own work in computer vision, there's a lot of talk. So you're working on a long way away from anything that being put into a commercial product. So just get the fundamental vision right, and then before you start thinking about how it's applied into research.
Thank you very much, Mark, for the insightful comment. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so I will, before we close everything, this ARIVE lecture series was initially directed towards students who are just coming into this area, who want to work on XR, who are starting out. So what would be your very short 1 minute message to anybody who is interested or who is just starting out in this area? We'll just start with Barrett and then continue from there.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's tough. What do I say? I think just do what you like and be creative and have fun with it. So there's lots of doors that are open at the moment. It's a good time to get into this technology, and lots of opportunities. So just find something that you'd like to work on. Sorry, that's not exciting.
That's very inspirational.
Yeah. Follow your heart, as they say.
Heide?
I would advise to play around with the technology as much as possible. So play games, try out head-mounted displays, engage in VR and especially in AR, because there's a lot more research needed, I think. And just really play around with what's out there and just engage with it, so that you see what's possible, what's not possible yet, and then to develop your ideas.
Thank you. Mark?
Oh, a little bit what the others said. Definitely with Heidi and Barrett about trying different things out. When you're a student, it's your opportunity to try and play and try a lot of different things. Try and be very, very broad in what you're doing. Hopefully by doing that, you can find what you're passionate about. And then the other piece of advice I would have is that find people to collaborate and work with. When I was a student, I took an unpaid internship at the University of Washington, in the US, and it cost me a lot of money to fly over to the US and live there without getting any money for a few months. But that changed my whole life, because that was the one place at the time when you could do amazing VR work. So find people that share your passion, and then try and do anything you can to collaborate with them, and hopefully that'll lead to a lot of fun and a great career in the future.
Thank you. And we will close the closing argument from Holger.
Oh, what a pressure. Actually, yeah, I agree with Mark. I was in the same lab actually as a visiting student for a couple of months. So probably that also set my track, you know, University of Washington. I would say XR is good because it's very complex, right? So you learn a lot of things, and even if you don't stay in that field, what you will have learned, you can apply to all kinds of other forms of computing careers, whatever. So it's really exciting and challenging. And I also want to repeat actually what the other said. You know, we are a creative industry. Right? We don't forget that, right? It's not, we are creating things, and that is, you know, try things out, you know, play with it, be creative, and give us new experiences, you know, in XR. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and this was the closing statement of the ARIVE lecture series for this year. So thank you again, our panel. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion. I will definitely rewatch the video and the recording of this. Thank you everyone for attending, and I hope we will see you all next year again.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks Alex for organizing. Thanks for running the show, Alex.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Thank you.